The courtroom in Charlotte, North Carolina, buzzed with whispers the moment Monica Jackson walked in. The air was thick, a mix of tension, curiosity, and the subtle scent of polished wood and fear. Cameras clicked from the local press corner. Everyone wanted a glimpse of the woman who had allegedly attacked a police officer. Monica moved with a quiet grace, her steps measured, deliberate. Her posture was military, straight back, shoulders squared, head high. Yet her eyes carried the kind of calm that unnerved people used to control. She wasn't here to make a scene. She was here to face one. At the prosecution's table sat Officer Bradley Simmons, his white uniform perfectly pressed, his badge gleaming under the courtroom lights. He wore the smug confidence of a man convinced the system was on his side. He exchanged nods with the district attorney and leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. The bailiff announced, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Howard Grayson." Everyone stood. The judge, an older man with silver hair and a steady gaze, took his seat. Court is now in session. State versus Monica Jackson. Benjamin Carter, Monica's young defense attorney, leaned closer. "We'll take it one question at a time. Don't let 'em bait you." Monica gave a short nod. "I faced worse under enemy fire, Ben. I can handle this." Benjamin looked confused for a second, but didn't ask. He assumed it was just a figure of speech. Simmons took the stand first. The prosecutor's voice was sharp, rehearsed. "Officer Simmons, can you tell the court what happened on the night of March 12th? Simmons straightened his back, turning toward the jury. "Yes, ma'am. I was conducting a routine traffic stop around 9 p.m. The defendant, Ms. Jackson, refused to provide identification, became agitated, and attempted to grab my firearm. I had no choice but to restrain her for my safety." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Monica sat motionless. Her expression didn't flinch, didn't even shift. Only her fingers tapped lightly against the wooden table, a steady rhythm, almost like counting. Benjamin scribbled notes, circling the phrase, "attempted to grab my firearm." He whispered, "Classic power move, make the black woman the aggressor." As Simmons continued, his tone grew theatrical. "She shouted, accused me of racial bias, and then reached for me. I followed proper procedure, used minimum force, and waited for backup." The prosecutor smiled. "Thank you, Officer Simmons. You've served this city for 11 years, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you've never had a complaint filed against you before?" Simmons smiled. "No, ma'am." Benjamin looked up briefly, a small frown forming. That was a lie. He was almost sure of it. But it wasn't the time to strike yet. Judge Grayson turned to Monica's side. "Defense may cross-examine." Benjamin stood, buttoned his navy suit jacket, and stepped toward the witness stand. His voice was polite, but edged with confidence. "Officer Simmons, you said this was a routine traffic stop. What was the reason you pulled Miss Jackson over?" Simmons blinked. She failed to signal when changing lanes." Benjamin's eyebrows lifted slightly. "In a nearly empty street at 9 at night?" Simmons' jaw tightened. "Yes, sir. Law is the law." Benjamin nodded slowly. "And when she asked why she was being stopped, you described her as agitated, correct?" "That's right." "Did she raise her voice?" Not at first." "So she was calm?" "For a moment, yes." Benjamin smiled faintly. "So what changed?" The officer's eyes flicked toward Monica. "She refused to comply." "Or did she simply ask questions you didn't like?" A low murmur rolled through the gallery. Simmons' mouth opened, then shut again. Judge Grayson rapped his gavel lightly. "Counselor, keep it professional." "Of course, Your Honor." Benjamin nodded, stepping back. He turned toward Monica and whispered, "He's rattled. We'll keep tightening the screws." As the session ended for lunch recess, Simmons walked past Monica with a smirk. "Good luck, sweetheart," he muttered. Monica didn't even look at him. "You'll need it more than I do," she said quietly. Benjamin watched the exchange, slightly taken aback by her composure. "You didn't even blink," he said once they were outside. Monica looked out the courthouse window, her reflection calm and unreadable. "She thinks I'm just another black woman who backed down," she said softly. "Let him think that." She turned to Benjamin, her tone cool but certain. "When people underestimate you, that's when you win." The attorney nodded slowly, finally realizing this wasn't just a client defending herself. This was a woman who had trained her entire life to face pressure, to fight injustice, even when it wore a badge. And somewhere deep down, Benjamin had the sense that Officer Simmons had picked the wrong woman to lie about.
The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The media had already spun the story overnight. Local woman accused of assaulting police officer claims innocence. By the time Monica and Benjamin arrived, the seats were full again. Reporters lined the back wall, ready to capture the day's drama. Benjamin whispered as they sat down, "You ready?" Monica gave a calm, half-smile. "Always." Judge Grayson entered, gavel in hand. "Court is now in session." The prosecutor stood first. "Your Honor, the state would like to recall Officer Simmons for further testimony." Simmons walked confidently to the stand again, the perfect image of a man who believed he held all the cards. His tone was rehearsed, even smoother than before. "After I asked Ms. Jackson for her driver's license, she refused and began shouting obscenities. She tried to exit her vehicle, which was a threat to my safety. When I told her to stay inside, she stepped toward me aggressively." He turned to the jury, pausing dramatically. "That's when she tried to grab my weapon." The jury shifted uneasily. Monica sat still, eyes locked on him. Not a blink, not a muscle moved. Benjamin scribbled something down, then leaned over to whisper, "He's doubling down. That means he's scared." When it was the defense's turn, Benjamin stood. He paced slowly toward the witness stand, every step deliberate. "Officer Simmons," he began, "you've served this community for 11 years. I imagine you've handled many tense situations." "Yes, sir." "And in that time, you've learned to stay calm under pressure?" "Of course." Benjamin nodded thoughtfully. "So, when Ms. Jackson allegedly yelled obscenities, how did you respond?" "I told her to calm down." "With your weapon drawn?" "No, I didn't draw my weapon until she..." "Until she what, officer?" Benjamin's tone sharpened just slightly. Simmons hesitated. I'm not sure what she was reaching for." Benjamin smiled faintly, as if he'd been waiting for that. "So you're not sure whether she was reaching for you or something else, yet you claim she tried to grab your weapon?" A murmur rippled through the courtroom again. Simmons' jaw tensed. "I know what I saw," he snapped. Benjamin raised an eyebrow. "Of course you do." He turned to the judge. "No further questions, for now." Judge Grayson nodded. "Very well, we'll take a short recess." As everyone stood, Simmons shot Monica a glare, one that would have intimidated most people. But Monica met his eyes without a flicker of fear. Her calm unnerved him more than any insult could. When they stepped into the hallway, Benjamin exhaled sharply. "He's sweating. You saw that?" Monica's lips curved slightly. "He's losing control. Men like him don't know what to do when their power doesn't work." Benjamin nodded, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "I requested the dashcam footage from his patrol car. They said it's unavailable due to technical issues." Monica gave a small, knowing smile. "Of course it is." She crossed her arms, looking out the tall courthouse window. "I know his type, Ben. He's not just lying, he's covering something." Benjamin frowned. "How can you be so sure?" Monica turned toward him. "Because I've seen men like him before. Men who think a badge makes them untouchable. Her voice softened, but her eyes hardened. The difference is, I know how to fight men like that. Benjamin studied her for a moment, sensing there was more beneath her calm exterior. You sound like someone who's done this before, he said carefully. Monica's gaze lingered on the courthouse steps below. Let's just say, I've dealt with tougher battles than this one. Before Benjamin could ask more, a woman approached. Carla Brooks, an investigative journalist for the Charlotte Daily. Miss Jackson, she said, I believe I have something you'll want to see. She handed Benjamin a USB drive. A neighbor across the street from where the arrest happened sent this to me. Their security camera caught everything. Benjamin's eyes widened. You're kidding. Carla shook her head. I don't know what's on it, but if it's real, it could change everything. Monica looked at the drive for a long moment, then back at Benjamin. Guess it's time we let the truth speak. Benjamin smiled, a flicker of hope lighting his face for the first time. We'll file to present this tomorrow. Monica's voice was steady, calm, but there was fire behind it now. He used his uniform to try and destroy my name. He's about to learn what happens when the truth wears armor. Benjamin looked at her curiously. Armor? Monica just smiled faintly. You'll see. As the day ended, Simmons walked past the hallway again, still wearing his smug grin. But this time, Monica didn't just let him pass. She looked him straight in the eye, her voice low, steady, and cold. You should have checked your mirrors, officer. Simmons frowned. What? Because the truth's been following you the whole time. She walked away, leaving him frozen in the corridor, that smug grin finally fading.
The next morning, the sky over Charlotte was gray, the kind that felt heavy, like the world knew something big was about to happen. The courthouse was quieter this time, but the tension inside was electric. Benjamin sat at the defense table, tapping his pen nervously. If this footage is legit, it could blow the case wide open. Monica sat beside him, calm as ever. Then let's make sure it does. Judge Grayson entered. Court is now in session. Benjamin stood. Your Honor, the defense has obtained new evidence. We request permission to introduce a video recording from a private security camera that captured the incident in question. The prosecutor immediately objected. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The evidence was not disclosed in discovery. Benjamin held up the USB drive. We received it less than 12 hours ago from a verified source. It's directly relevant to the truth of this case. The judge considered for a long moment, tapping his gavel lightly. Objection overruled. The court will review the footage. A large monitor was rolled into place. The lights dimmed slightly. Everyone leaned forward. The clerk inserted the drive, and the video began to play. At first, there was only the image of a quiet suburban street, a parked car, a police cruiser pulling up behind it. Then the audio kicked in. Simmons approached the driver's side window. License and registration, he barked. Monica's voice was calm. Can I ask why I'm being stopped, officer? You were driving erratically. I was going 35 in a 35, Monica said evenly. The camera angle shifted just enough to show Simmons placing his hand on his gun before Monica even moved. Step out of the vehicle, he ordered. I haven't done anything wrong, Monica said, her voice still controlled. Simmons leaned closer, shouting, "Step out now!" He yanked open her door, grabbing her arm roughly. Monica tried to pull away. He shoved her against the car, yelling, "Stop resisting!" The courtroom was silent. Every breath, every sound, frozen. On screen, Simmons forced Monica to the ground. "I'm not resisting!" she yelled. "Stop moving!" he barked again, pressing his knee into her back. Then the footage ended. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The truth had filled the room like thunder. Judge Grayson's voice was low, grave. "Officer Simmons, is this accurate?" Simmons stammered, his face pale. I can't confirm that's the full video. It might be doctored." Benjamin stepped forward. "The original metadata confirms it's unaltered, Your Honor. We'll have an expert testify tomorrow if needed." The prosecutor rubbed his forehead, whispering something under his breath. Monica sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. No gloating, no anger, just calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing the truth finally has a voice. Simmons' lawyer tried to intervene, but the damage was done. The jury had seen everything. Benjamin turned to the judge. "Your Honor, given this evidence, we request the charges against my client be dismissed immediately." Judge Grayson exhaled slowly. "The court will recess for 30 minutes. I need to review this thoroughly." The gavel struck. As the courtroom emptied, reporters rushed for the doors. Simmons slumped in his chair, his earlier arrogance replaced with panic. Benjamin turned to Monica. "That was it. That's the turning point." But Monica didn't smile. She looked at Simmons, pale, trembling, sweating under the weight of his own lies. "No," she said quietly. "It's not over yet." Benjamin frowned. "What do you mean?" Monica stood, her voice calm but firm. "That video proves he lied, but it doesn't prove why. He didn't just act out of anger. He acted out of habit, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows that." Benjamin followed her gaze as she looked through the glass window of the courtroom, past Simmons, past the prosecutor, toward the emblem of the Charlotte Police Department hanging on the wall. This isn't just about him. It's about the system that lets him exist. Benjamin swallowed. "You really want to take on the whole department?" Monica turned to him with the faintest trace of a smirk. "Benjamin, I fought tougher battles. Remember what I told you yesterday?" He nodded. "That you fought tougher battles?" Monica met his eyes. "Exactly. I didn't tell you where." Benjamin frowned slightly, confused, but before he could ask, Monica gathered her files and walked out of the courtroom, her posture straight and unshaken. Behind her, Simmons sat alone, the crowd's whispers closing in like a storm. The video had turned the tide, but Monica's next move would change the entire war.
The next morning, the courthouse felt different. The air was charged, like everyone sensed something monumental was about to happen. The video had gone viral overnight. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Words like #JusticeForMonica and #TruthOverBadge trended across social media. Reporters waited on the courthouse steps, microphones in hand, shouting Monica's name as she arrived. But she didn't say a word. She simply walked past them, calm and focused, a quiet storm behind her eyes. Inside, Benjamin was pacing. "You know this video's already changed everything, right? The prosecutor's office is on fire, the department's scrambling to save face." Monica set down her briefcase. "Good, but we're not done yet." Benjamin blinked. "Monica, the charges are about to be dropped. What more do you want?" Monica looked up at him, her tone steady. "Justice, Ben. Not just for me, for every person who didn't get a camera to tell their story." Benjamin sighed, rubbing his temples. "You sound like you're planning something bigger." Monica's gaze didn't waver. "Because I am." The courtroom filled quickly. Judge Grayson entered, looking more solemn than usual. Before proceeding, I have reviewed the video evidence presented yesterday. Based on the footage, the court finds no credible basis for the charges against Ms. Jackson. A murmur rippled through the gallery, some clapping, some gasping. Simmons's face went ghost white. But Judge Grayson wasn't done. However, the video raises serious concerns regarding Officer Simmons' conduct. An internal investigation has been requested by the Department of Justice. Benjamin grinned and whispered, "You did it." Monica nodded once, but she wasn't celebrating. "Your Honor," she said suddenly, standing, "if I may, I'd like to make a statement." The courtroom quieted. Judge Grayson hesitated, then nodded. "You may proceed, Ms. Jackson." Monica walked to the center of the courtroom. Her steps were measured, deliberate. Her voice, calm, clear, commanding. For most of my life, I believed in discipline, respect, and service. I spent 20 years in the Navy. I led men and women through combat zones, through chaos, through fear, through death. We fought for this country because we believed in something greater than ourselves. Gasps filled the room. Even Benjamin's jaw dropped slightly. I retired as a lieutenant commander in the Navy SEALs, and I swore an oath to protect the innocent and uphold the truth. The courtroom was silent, stunned. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. But last month, I was thrown to the ground, handcuffed and humiliated, not because I broke the law, but because someone thought my skin color made me a threat. Her voice hardened, low and powerful. That officer didn't see a veteran. He didn't see a human being. He saw what his bias told him to see. And that bias nearly ruined my life. Benjamin looked around. Even the prosecutor was listening, eyes lowered. This isn't just my story. It's the story of every man and woman who's been silenced, judged, or mistreated by those who swore to serve them. And I won't stay silent anymore. She turned toward Simmons, whose hands trembled slightly on the defense table. "Officer Simmons, I don't hate you, but I need you and everyone like you to understand that authority without accountability isn't justice. It's tyranny." The judge didn't interrupt. He just watched her, his expression unreadable. "If we want change, it starts here, in rooms like this, with people like us. I may wear a suit now, but I'll always be a soldier, and I'm still fighting, just on a different battlefield." The gallery erupted in applause. Some jurors wiped tears. Simmons sat frozen, his lips parted, but no words coming out. Benjamin whispered, "Monica, you just made history." But Monica wasn't done. After court adjourned, reporters surrounded her on the courthouse steps. Flashbulbs exploded. "Ms. Jackson, how do you feel about the verdict? Do you plan to press charges? Are you really a Navy SEAL?" Monica paused, then turned to face the cameras. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for reform. What happened to me isn't new. It's just finally been caught on tape. But I promise you this, it won't stop here." She held up the court's ruling. "This paper clears my name, but it doesn't fix the system. And that's my next mission." Benjamin stepped beside her, smiling in quiet awe. "You mean that literally, don't you?" Monica looked out at the sea of microphones, her voice unwavering. "I spent 20 years fighting for my country overseas. Now I'm fighting for it right here at home." Simmons watched from a distance, his face pale, realizing what he'd unleashed, not a defendant, but a movement. As the cameras flashed and the crowd cheered, Monica turned and whispered to Benjamin, almost to herself, "Battlefield or courtroom, truth is still the sharpest weapon I've ever carried."
2 weeks after the verdict,
The ripple effects of Monica Jackson's testimony had exploded across the country. News outlets replayed her courtroom speech over and over. CNN, The Washington Post, and The Guardian ran headlines like, "Navy SEAL Veteran Shatters Courtroom Silence on Racial Bias." From war zones to courtrooms, Lieutenant Commander Jackson's new mission for justice. But not everyone was celebrating. The police union was furious. The department claimed Monica's video was taken out of context. Anonymous hate mail started arriving at Benjamin's office. Online forums were divided. Half called Monica a hero, half called her a liar. Benjamin slammed his laptop shut after reading one of the comments. "They're twisting everything, Monica. The department's PR machine is painting you as some radical activist." Monica didn't even flinch. She was standing by the window, looking out over downtown Charlotte, arms crossed. Let them talk. The truth doesn't need spin. Benjamin turned toward her. "You really believe that?" She met his eyes. "I didn't survive 3 deployments by backing down from noise. I'll fight this war the same way, with discipline, with proof, and with a plan." That night, Monica sat alone at her kitchen table, surrounded by papers. Complaint forms, officer misconduct reports, body cam statistics. Her old Navy discipline had kicked in. She was mapping a strategy. She murmured to herself, "You can't fix what you don't expose." Then she opened a new file on her laptop, Project Valor. The idea was simple: build a nonprofit to support victims of racial profiling and police misconduct, pairing them with legal resources, trauma counseling, and most importantly, visibility. When she pitched the idea to Benjamin, he laughed, not mockingly, but in disbelief. "You're turning this into a mission?" Monica smiled faintly. "I told you, I never stopped being a soldier." They filed the nonprofit paperwork within a month. Donations poured in from veterans, activists, and everyday Americans who had seen her story. Within 6 weeks, Project Valor had a small office, 3 staff members, and a waiting list of people needing help. But the more visibility Monica gained, the more dangerous things became. One night, she returned home to find her car's windshield shattered and a note taped to it. "Stop embarrassing the department, or next time it's you." Benjamin insisted she report it to the police. "You can't ignore this, Monica. Whoever did this is escalating." Monica sighed. "You think the same department that tried to bury me will suddenly protect me?" Still, she filed the report. And when the officer taking her statement recognized her, he looked uneasy, almost guilty. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "there's a lot of folks in the department who respect what you did. Just know not everyone's your enemy." For the first time in days, Monica's hard exterior softened. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." A week later, Benjamin burst into her office. "You're not going to believe this. Simmons was fired." Monica froze. "What?" "Yeah, the internal investigation confirmed the excessive force allegations. He's also being investigated for falsifying multiple arrest reports. He's facing possible charges." Monica sat down slowly, her eyes distant. "It's not about revenge," she murmured. "But maybe this is how the system starts to heal, one truth at a time." Benjamin smiled. "You just don't quit, do you?" Monica shook her head, her voice calm and resolute. "The battlefield's changed, but the mission's the same." Later that night, Monica attended a town hall meeting. Cameras flashed as she stepped up to the microphone. People stood, clapping, chanting her name. She raised her hand for quiet and spoke softly, but every word carried weight. "I didn't ask to become a symbol. I just wanted to be treated like any other American, with dignity. What happened to me isn't unique. It's part of something bigger, something that needs to change. And change doesn't happen through anger. It happens through action." The room went silent. Every eye in the building was on her.
So tonight, she continued, I'm asking you, veterans, mothers, students, officers, everyone, don't look away. Stand up, speak up, and when they try to silence you, remember, silence protects the oppressor, never the oppressed. The crowd erupted in applause. Some cried, some saluted. Monica stepped back, taking it all in, not as a hero, but as a soldier who'd found a new kind of battle to fight. As she walked off the stage, Benjamin caught up to her. You realize you started something unstoppable, right? Monica smiled, her voice steady but full of conviction. Then let's make sure it ends the right way. Outside, flashlights glimmered, cameras rolled, and her voice echoed through the night, a call for truth, for change, for every silenced voice finally being heard.
As Project Valor grew, so did the resistance. Within 3 months, Monica was on every major talk show, from Good Morning America to The View. She spoke calmly, firmly about accountability and reform. But behind the applause and the polished smiles, she could feel the pushback. Emails leaked from city officials calling her a PR nightmare. Police unions accused her of inciting anti-cop sentiment. The mayor's office postponed meetings. Suddenly, grants that had been promised to Project Valor were under review. Benjamin stormed into her office one morning holding a newspaper. They're calling you a fraud now, a Navy SEAL imposter. Someone's claiming you forged your service record. Monica didn't flinch. They're desperate. That's how you know it's working. But Benjamin's face was pale. They filed a federal inquiry, Monica. This isn't just gossip. Monica took the paper from him, scanning the headline. Hero or hoax? Former Navy officer under investigation. She exhaled slowly. Then I'll show them the truth again. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, the same place where Project Valor was born, surrounded by old service documents. Discharge papers, commendation medals, letters from her commanding officers. Each one was a piece of her life, proof of who she was. She sent them all to Benjamin with a single message. Let's end this on my terms. 2 days later, they held a press conference. Cameras flashed as Monica stood before the podium, in her dark blue blazer with a small Navy SEAL trident pin on her lapel. Many of you have seen the rumors, and because the truth matters, not just to me, but to everyone who's ever been silenced, I'm here to set the record straight. She held up a folder. These are my official service documents, verified by the Department of Defense. My service began in 1999. My final deployment was in 2018. My rank was Lieutenant Commander. And yes, I was one of the first black women to serve in the Navy's Special Operations Program. Gasps echoed through the room. Some reporters lowered their cameras in shock. Monica's voice grew firmer. The people trying to destroy my reputation aren't doing it because I lied. They're doing it because I told the truth. She leaned closer to the microphone. And they're afraid of what happens when people like me stop being silent. After the conference, the inquiry was dropped within 48 hours. The Pentagon confirmed every detail of her record. But the victory came with a cost. Monica's home was vandalized again, windows smashed, the words "Traitor to Blue" spray-painted across her door. Benjamin tried to convince her to move. This is too much, Monica. You've done enough. She shook her head. If I leave now, what does that say to the people I'm counting on? A few days later, she received a letter from a 12-year-old named Jasmine in Detroit. Dear Miss Jackson, I watched your speech with my mom. I want to be like you when I grow up, strong and brave. Thank you for showing me that being different can be powerful. She read it 3 times before setting it gently on her desk. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled. That's why I can't stop, she whispered. Still, things were escalating. Anonymous calls, shadows outside her house at night. Someone even hacked Project Valor's website, replacing its homepage with the message, "Back off or we'll bury you next." Benjamin insisted on hiring security. Monica reluctantly agreed. "I can handle pressure," she told him, "but I can't handle fear ruling the people I'm fighting for." Then, one evening, as Monica walked to her car after a meeting, she noticed a black SUV idling across the street. The windows were tinted. The engine rumbled low. She froze for a moment, instincts kicking in. SEAL training. Observe, assess, act. The SUV rolled forward, slow and deliberate. Then, screech! Police lights. The vehicle peeled off as two patrol cars gave chase. An officer ran toward her. "Miss Jackson, you okay? We got a call. Anonymous tip said there might be a threat." She steadied her breathing. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Looks like the system's fighting back." That night, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Strong, unshaken, but tired. She whispered to herself, "They can try to break me, but they won't break the mission." She turned off the light, the glow from the city flickering through the blinds, a reminder that the fight was far from over. The following morning, Monica sat in the small conference room of Project Valor, sunlight cutting through the blinds. Volunteers shuffled papers and typed on laptops, the hum of determination filling the space. This was more than a nonprofit now. It was a movement, and Monica was its heartbeat. Benjamin entered, holding a stack of letters. "Monica, you've got another wave of people reaching out. Victims of profiling, harassment, excessive force, all over the country. They're asking for your help." Monica leaned back in her chair, a faint smile on her lips. "Then we'll give it, every single one of them." Her first call was with a young man in Chicago named Malik, whose father had been wrongfully detained. Monica listened, her face a mixture of calm authority and quiet fire. "You were scared, and that's normal. But you're not alone. Not anymore." By the end of the week, Project Valor had established partnerships with law firms, psychologists, and community organizations in New York, Los Angeles, and Atlanta. The phone lines never stopped ringing. But with visibility came threats. Anonymous emails, threatening letters, even surveillance of the office. The department's internal factions were unsettled. Some officers quietly supported Monica, recognizing the truth in her mission. Others plotted, trying to undermine her credibility. One evening, as Monica prepared to leave, a familiar face appeared at the office door. Officer Renee Taylor, a decorated patrol officer known for integrity and fairness. "I wanted to come by," Renee said softly. "I've been watching your work. You're shaking things up, in a good way, but you're making some powerful enemies." Monica nodded. "I know. That's why I need people like you, who know how the system works and want to change it from within." Renee smiled faintly. "Count me in." Monica's phone buzzed. A message from a former Navy SEAL comrade. "Heard about the press conference. Proud of you. Call me. We need to strategize." She took a deep breath. "Benjamin, this is bigger than Charlotte. We're about to take the fight national." Benjamin raised an eyebrow. "You mean expose systemic corruption and advocate for victims on a massive scale?" Monica's eyes sparkled. "Exactly. And we're going to do it without fear, without compromise, and without letting the truth be silenced." The next day, she addressed a crowd of journalists outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed, microphones hovered near her face, and reporters shouted questions. "I didn't step forward for fame," she said, voice steady, resonant. "I stepped forward because silence protects the oppressor and action empowers the oppressed. And now, people across this country are standing with us. Change is coming, and it starts with exposing the truth." Behind a crowd,
Simmons watched from a distance, flanked by a few colleagues. His face was pale, eyes darting nervously. The woman he had once underestimated was now a figure of authority, resilience, and undeniable moral power. Monica's words carried over the crowd, echoing into the streets. "We will not stop. We will not be silent. And we will fight for justice for everyone who has been denied it." By the time she walked back to her car, the energy in the city felt different. The tide had shifted. People were talking. People were listening. And Monica knew the system couldn't ignore them forever. As the sun set over Charlotte, Monica glanced at her reflection in the car window, steady and unyielding. Battlefield, courtroom, or city streets, the mission remains the same. Benjamin slid into the passenger seat. "You're unstoppable." Monica smiled faintly. "No, Ben. The truth is unstoppable." And somewhere in the shadows, the world began to realize that underestimating her, or anyone fighting for justice, was a dangerous mistake.
Months later, Project Valor had grown from a small office in Charlotte into a national network. Offices opened in Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, and Atlanta, each staffed with attorneys, social workers, and advocates. The nonprofit became a hub for whistleblowers and victims of racial profiling, police misconduct, and systemic abuse. Monica stood at the podium in D.C., addressing a crowd that filled the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Reporters from every major outlet were present. Flags waved, cameras rolled, and people chanted, "Justice for all! Justice for all!" Monica's voice was calm, resonant, carrying the weight of every story she had seen and every battle she had fought. "When I first stood in a courtroom against an officer who lied about me, I never imagined it would lead here. But I learned something vital. The truth has power, and courage can ignite a movement. This isn't just about me. This is about everyone who's been silenced, ignored, or mistreated by a system that was supposed to protect them." She paused, letting the words settle over the crowd. "We've built something stronger than fear. Project Valor is more than a nonprofit. It's a promise that no one will face injustice alone, that voices will be heard, and that change is not just possible, but inevitable." The crowd erupted in cheers. Tears streamed down the faces of some. Parents held children on their shoulders. Veterans saluted. For Monica, it wasn't the applause that mattered, it was the impact, the lives being transformed. Backstage, Benjamin handed her a folder. The Department of Justice just announced a nationwide review of misconduct complaints and racial bias policies in law enforcement. Monica opened it slowly, scanning the documents. "Finally," she murmured, "accountability. Real accountability." Then she looked out over the crowd. She said softly, "This is only the beginning. The fight doesn't end here, but today we celebrate victories, small, big, and everyone in between." Later, in a quiet moment alone, Monica returned to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. The city lights shimmered across the reflecting pool. She thought of her days in the Navy, the missions, the battles, the discipline that had carried her through the worst of chaos. And she realized that every lesson, every hardship had prepared her for this fight. Benjamin approached. "You're tired," he said gently. Monica smiled faintly. "I am, but not defeated, not even close, because the truth never sleeps, and neither will those who fight for it." Behind her, the skyline of Washington gleamed, a city of power, politics, and possibility. But for Monica Jackson, it was also a city of hope, justice, and unwavering courage. And somewhere, far from the courthouse in Charlotte, Officer Simmons received the final report. Fired, facing charges, and exposed. The man who had once thought he could intimidate her now became a symbol of what happens when lies meet resilience. Monica turned away from the city lights, feeling a quiet satisfaction, not for revenge, not for recognition, but for the countless lives her actions would touch. Her mission was far from over, but one truth was undeniable. Justice, when pursued relentlessly and courageously, can change the world. She whispered to herself, almost as a vow. From battlefields to courtrooms, from silence to voice, the mission continues. The sun rose over the National Mall the next morning, casting a golden glow on the reflecting pool. A symbol, she thought, of the light that can follow even the darkest nights. Her legacy was no longer just her own, it was everyone's who ever needed a champion. And in that moment, Monica Jackson smiled. She had won.